It's been said that a room without books is like a body without a soul. Well, to make sure your soul is filled with nothing but creativity and imagination, we've created the ultimate must-read book list of all time. Over the next couple of minutes, we'll bring you the 12 books you absolutely must read, even if it's just once. You owe it to yourself. All of these books have been updated by Kizzy Magazine with new covers and interiors. Some have new forewords and introductions, and where possible, Kizzy Magazine has included the original illustrations that were published when the books first came out. If there's a book you've missed out on or would like to visit again, we've provided a very handy link to every single one of them in the description box below. Click the link and you're taken straight to Amazon. Oh, and before we jump into our top 12 list, please take a second to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot and it helps to motivate us to produce more great content like this. So without further ado, get a notebook and pen, sit back and enjoy the all-time 12 books everyone should read. To get our list started, I had to include this as our very first book, and it's a book that I read many years ago, and I'm constantly going back to it, and I'm still astounded at just how insightful it really is. Number one is, of course, The Prince by Machiavelli. No other work in modern political thought, with the possible exception of Marx's Communist Manifesto, remotely competes with the influence exerted by Machiavelli's Prince. Thousands and thousands of thick tomes have been written on the history of its reception, but there's no question that The Prince teaches the use of evil means in the pursuit of legitimate political ends. A must read. Number two, Pride and Prejudice. Now, Pride and Prejudice is a delightfully comic story with richly drawn characters, and it's a thrillingly convoluted love story. In addition, the novel provides a fascinating view into the role of women and men in early 19th century England through the perceptive and unblinking eye of Austen. Number three, Great Expectations. In what may be Charles Dickens' best novel, humble orphan Pip is apprenticed to the dirty work of the forge, but dares to dream of becoming a gentleman, and one day, under sudden and enigmatic circumstances, he finds himself in possession of, you guessed it, great expectations. In this gripping tale of crime and guilt, revenge and reward, the compelling characters include Magwitch, the fearful and fearsome convict, Estella, whose beauty is excelled only by her haughtiness, and of course the embittered Miss Havisham, an eccentric jilted bride. A true classic that everybody should read at least once. Number four, Dracula. Now, when Jonathan Harker visits Transylvania to help Count Dracula with the purchase of a London house, he makes terrifying discoveries about his client and his castle. In the following battle of wits between the sinister Count Dracula and a determined group of adversaries, Bram Stoker created a masterpiece of the horror genre. Although Stoker didn't invent the vampire, the novel's influence on the popularity of vampires has been singularly responsible for many theatrical and film interpretations throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. This is a book that defined the horror genre and created a character that still lives on to this very day. Excellent stuff. Number five, Frankenstein. Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. I think it's probably better known as Frankenstein. Anyway, Frankenstein is a novel written by, of course, Mary Shelley, wife of the romantic poet and philosopher Percy Bysshe Shelley. Frankenstein's a novel infused with some elements of the Gothic novel and the Romantic movement. It's also a warning against the overreaching of modern man and the Industrial Revolution, alluded to in the novel's subtitle, The Modern Prometheus. The story has had an influence across literature and popular culture and spawned a complete genre of horror stories and films. It's also arguably considered the first fully realized science fiction and fantasy novel ever written. Number six, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse's novel is a beautiful account of a life's journey from a public and known religion to a personal and esoteric private spiritual journey. It's the story of a man never quite satisfied with where he is, but always striving to find a bit more of the meaning and struggle for meaningful existence. It's a book that no seeker of higher things should miss. In Siddhartha, we follow a spiritual seeker through his wandering, enlightenment, and finally through his entrance back into the world. The seeker, Siddhartha, is placed in the time of the Buddha and actually meets the master himself, hearing his teachings firsthand. Surprisingly, Siddhartha chooses not to become a disciple of the Buddha, but instead attempts to attain the ultimate goal on his own. Siddhartha finds what he seeks and then returns to civilian life, living among ordinary people as an enlightened one. Throughout, the reader finds himself immersed in the world of Hindu and Buddhist thought. This book will change your life. Highly recommended. Number 7, The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald 1925 jazz-age novel about the impossibility of recapturing the past, was surprisingly initially a failure. In fact, at the time of F. Scott Fitzgerald's death, the book had sold just less than 100,000 copies worldwide. Today, the story of Gatsby's doomed love for the unobtainable daisy is considered a defining novel of the 20th century and has also been described as the great American novel. Definitely worth reading. Number 8, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes and his assistant Dr. Watson have captivated audiences for generations. This collection of 12 short stories is fantastic. From stolen jewels to mysterious circumstances and brilliant crimes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes has it all. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is full of mesmerizing deductions and wonderful short adventures. I highly recommend this collection of short stories for every Sherlock Holmes fan and anyone searching for great mystery novels or short stories. This brings us to number 9 on our list of the 12 books that everybody in the world should read at least once. Number 9, The Extraordinary Adventures of Arsene Lupin, Gentleman-Burglar. Yep, we've all seen it on Netflix and loved every single minute of it. But did you know that this classic crime caper established the anti-hero character of Arsene Lupin, who is the archetypal gentleman thief? A master of disguise, Lupin demonstrates an effortless ability to transition between high society and his actual day job as a burglar. Charming and dapper to a fault, Lupin appears to his contemporaries as the consummate embodiment of a refined gent. Think James Bond and Sherlock Holmes, but with a very subtle French accent, and you're almost there. Number 10, The Greek Philosophers. For readers not familiar with philosophy and its proponents, there can be no better introduction to the subject than The Greek Philosophers by Alfred William Benn. Now, presented in 2 volumes, The Greek Philosophers has been selected by scholars as being culturally important and is part of the knowledge base of civilization as we know it. Spanning the works of Plato, Socrates and Aristotle through to Epicurus and Lucretius, and eventually arriving at the spiritualism of Plotinus, The Greek Philosophers is perhaps one of the most significant and influential books on Greek philosophy ever written, and as such it certainly deserves a place on your bookshelf. Number 11, Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Bored on a hot afternoon, Alice, a bright and inquisitive child, follows a white rabbit down a rabbit hole and finds herself in Wonderland, a very odd place indeed. Now, this unique story mixes satire and puzzles, comedy and anxiety, mock turtles and griffos, and it provides an astute description of the experience of childhood. Lewis Carroll's beloved and witty story was made into an animated film by Disney in 1951. It's also the inspiration for Tim Burton's 2010 film, where a grown-up and adult Alice returns to the peculiar world she discovered as a child. The film features Johnny Depp, fantastic as always, Helen Bonham Carter and Anne Hathaway among a cast of British stars. This brings us to number 12 on our list of books that everybody should read at least once. Number 12, 12 Years a Slave. Solomon Northup obtained his freedom in January 1853 and wrote this book the same year, and is considered the best slave narrative ever written. This novel gives insight into the slavery practice, judicial authorities of different states, the inhumane punishments of black people who were subjected to a life of misery and slavery. The author also records the treatment of other slaves, treatment that he witnessed in those 12 years. This book is a heart-wrenching story and one of the best classics I've ever read. Pick up this book and read it as soon as possible. You owe it to yourself.